Ramadan arrives when Allah decides your heart is ready to see what was always there. Ramadan does not arrive randomly. It arrives by permission. Not permission from the moon, not permission from the calendar, but permission from Allah, who created your heart and knows exactly when it is ready to see what it could not see before. Because most of the year, your heart is occupied with survival, occupied with people, occupied with expectations, fears, distractions, and endless noise. Your attention is constantly pulled outward into a world that demands your reaction but rarely nourishes your soul. And slowly, without realizing it, a veil forms. Not a physical veil, but a spiritual one. A veil made of forgetfulness. You still believe in Allah. You still know He exists, but you do not feel His nearness the same way. Your heart becomes heavy. Your awareness becomes dull. Your connection becomes distant. Not because Allah moved away from you, but because your attention moved away from Him. Ibn Arabi taught that Allah is never absent. It is the human heart that becomes absent. And Ramadan arrives to restore that presence. It arrives when Allah decides it is time for your heart to wake up again. This is why Ramadan feels different. Even before it begins, something inside you softens. You feel a quiet pull, a subtle invitation, a sense that this month carries something your soul has been missing. This is not imagination. This is recognition. Because deep inside you, beneath the distractions, beneath the emotional exhaustion, beneath the identity you built to survive this world, your soul has always known Allah. Ramadan does not create that knowledge. It reveals it. It reminds you of what was always there, waiting for you to return. And the fact that you are alive to witness this Ramadan means Allah has not closed the door on you. He is inviting you to see again. Fasting breaks the authority of your nafs, so your soul can finally return to Allah. You may think fasting is simply about not eating and not drinking, but fasting is not the removal of food. It is the removal of illusion. Because your nafs survives on constant feeding, not just feeding of the body, but feeding of comfort, attention, stimulation, and control. The nafs wants to feel secure in the physical world. It wants to be satisfied immediately. It wants to escape discomfort as quickly as possible. And most of the year, you obey it without realizing. When you feel hunger, you respond. When you feel boredom, you distract yourself. When you feel emotional discomfort, you search for something to soothe it. Your nafs becomes the authority that dictates your behavior, not because you are weak, but because this is what you trained it to do. Ramadan interrupts that authority. For the first time in a long time, your nafs demands something and you refuse. It asks for food and you say no. It asks for comfort and you remain patient. It asks for immediate relief and you choose Allah instead. And in that moment, something invisible begins to shift. Your nafs weakens, not physically alone, but psychologically, spiritually, existentially. It begins to realize it is no longer in control. And as its voice becomes quieter, another voice becomes louder. The voice of your soul, a voice you could not hear clearly before because it was buried beneath years of noise. Ibn Arabi taught that the nafs is not evil, but it is a veil. It pulls your awareness toward the temporary and away from the eternal. It convinces you to invest emotionally in what cannot remain. Fasting loosens its grip. It reminds you that you are not a servant of your impulses. You are a servant of Allah. And every moment you fast, you are not losing something. You are returning to your rightful center. You are remembering who was always meant to lead you. Not your hunger, not your fear, not your comfort, but your soul, which was created to face Allah directly. The restlessness you feel in Ramadan is the veil beginning to crack. There is a strange feeling that often appears in Ramadan. It is not pain, but it is not comfort either. It is restlessness, You may feel more emotional than usual, more sensitive, more aware of things you normally ignore. Certain distractions no longer satisfy you the same way. Certain conversations feel empty. Certain habits feel heavier, and you may not understand why. You may think something is wrong with you, but something is actually being revealed to you, because when the veil begins to crack, your heart begins to see what it was previously protected from. All year, distractions acted like anesthesia. They kept you numb, they kept you functioning, they kept you moving without forcing you to confront deeper truths. But Ramadan removes that anesthesia, not to hurt you, but to awaken you. Ibn Arabi taught that when Allah wants to bring a servant closer, He does not always add something to their life. Sometimes He removes the illusions that were keeping them asleep. And awakening is not always comfortable, because you begin to see the attachments that weakened you. You begin to see the habits that distanced you. You begin to see how much of your emotional stability was tied to things that were never permanent. This awareness can feel unsettling, because clarity dismantles illusion. But this discomfort is not punishment. It is mercy. It means your heart is no longer fully asleep. It means the veil that once blocked your vision is weakening. It means your soul is beginning to recognize what it was created for. And this restlessness is not a sign that you are lost. It is a sign that you are returning to a state of awareness, returning to a state of sincerity, returning to Allah, who was always closer to you than you were to yourself. Every time you deny yourself for Allah, the distance between you and Him collapses. There is something happening in Ramadan that you cannot see, but your soul feels it. Every time you feel hunger and choose patience, something shifts. Every time you feel the urge to indulge but stop yourself because Allah is watching, something changes. Every time you remain silent instead of speaking from anger, every time you lower your gaze instead of feeding distraction, every time you choose remembrance instead of forgetfulness, a distance begins to collapse. Not physical distance, spiritual distance, because the greatest barrier between you and Allah was never space. It was the dominance of your nafs. The nafs convinces you that your desires are urgent, that your comfort is necessary, that your impulses deserve immediate obedience. It trains you to react automatically, to serve your urges without questioning them. And every time you obey it blindly, the veil remains strong, not because Allah abandons you, but because you remain occupied with yourself. Ibn Arabi taught that the nafs is like a shadow. It appears large when the light is behind you, but when you turn toward the light, the shadow falls behind. Ramadan is teaching you to turn toward the light. Every act of fasting is an act of reorientation. You are no longer facing your desires as your master. You are facing Allah as your master. And this is why even small acts in Ramadan feel heavy with meaning, because they are not small. Each moment of restraint weakens the illusion that your nafs controls you. Each moment of sincerity strengthens your awareness that Allah sees you. And slowly, without announcement, without dramatic signs, your heart begins to move closer, not because Allah was far, but because you stopped turning away. This is the secret of Ramadan. It is not about proving your strength to Allah. It is about weakening everything inside you that made you forget Him. And when those internal barriers weaken, what remains is closeness that was always waiting for you. Ramadan reveals how much of your life was controlled by what was never meant to own you. Before Ramadan, many things felt permanent. Your routines felt necessary. Your distractions felt harmless. Your emotional attachments felt justified. You moved through life without questioning how much of your peace depended on conditions outside of you. You depended on comfort to feel stable. You depended on people to feel valued. You depended on distraction to avoid facing yourself. And it all felt normal. Because when something is repeated long enough, it stops feeling like control. It starts feeling like identity. But Ramadan interrupts that illusion. It removes what you thought you needed. And something unexpected happens. You survive. You function. You continue. You begin to realize that you were stronger than your dependencies. You begin to realize that many things you thought defined you were never essential. Ibn Arabi taught that attachment creates blindness. Not because attachment is evil, but because it convinces you that the temporary is permanent. It convinces you to anchor your heart in what cannot remain. And when those attachments weaken, clarity enters. You begin to see dunya differently. You begin to see how fragile it is, how quickly it changes, how easily it disappears. And instead of feeling fear, you begin to feel freedom. Because when your heart is no longer owned by temporary things, it becomes available for what is eternal. Ramadan is not emptying you to leave you weak. It is emptying you to make space. Space for sincerity, space for awareness, space for Allah. This is why Ramadan feels both heavy and peaceful at the same time. Heavy, because illusions are dissolving. Peaceful, because truth is returning. And when the veil begins to lift, you realize something that changes everything. You were never created to belong to dunya. You were created to belong to Allah. When the veil lifts, you stop needing dunya to feel whole. There was a time when your peace depended on things staying a certain way. You needed people to remain consistent. You needed your plans to unfold the way you expected. You needed comfort to remain stable. You needed reassurance to feel secure. And when those things changed, you felt it immediately, because your heart was leaning on what was never designed to carry it. Dunya gave you moments of relief, moments of happiness, moments of emotional safety, but it never gave you permanence. It never gave you something that could not be taken away. And deep down, even before Ramadan, you felt that instability. You felt how fragile everything was. But Ramadan begins to shift that dependence, not by giving you more of dunya, but by showing you that you were never dependent on it to begin with. When you fast, you function without feeding every desire. When you pray at night, you stand without needing anyone to stand beside you. When you sit in silence remembering Allah, you begin to feel a stability that does not come from anything physical. And slowly, your heart learns something it was never taught before. That wholeness was never located in creation. It was always located in your connection to the Creator. Ibn Arabi taught that the heart was designed to reflect Allah's presence, not to absorb the weight of the world. But when the heart becomes attached to dunya, it begins to carry burdens it was never meant to carry. It begins to feel incomplete, not because something is missing, but because it is looking in the wrong direction. Ramadan corrects that direction. It turns your heart away from dependence on what is temporary and reorients it toward what is eternal. And when that shift begins, something unexpected happens. You stop feeling emotionally controlled by external conditions. You stop feeling broken by small losses. You stop feeling defined by who stayed and who left. Because your sense of stability is no longer coming from what can disappear. It is coming from Allah, who never disappears. This is the moment the veil truly begins to lift. Because you are no longer searching for completion in a world designed to remain incomplete. You are returning to the only source that was always whole. The greatest gift of Ramadan is when your heart can no longer forget Allah. The greatest unveiling does not come as a vision. It comes as a permanent awareness. An awareness that stays with you after Ramadan ends. An awareness that changes how you move, how you think, how you exist. Because before Ramadan, it was easy to forget. You remembered Allah in moments of need. You remembered Him in moments of fear. You remembered Him when you felt lost. But when comfort returned, your awareness faded. Not intentionally, but gradually. Because dunya is loud. It constantly competes for your attention. It constantly invites your heart to invest itself in what is visible, what is immediate, what feels urgent. And slowly, without realizing, your awareness of Allah becomes something occasional instead of constant. Ramadan restores that constancy. Through fasting, your body remembers its weakness. Through prayer, your soul remembers its origin. Through silence, your heart remembers its Lord. And as these moments repeat, something begins to anchor inside you. You begin to feel Allah's presence even when you are not praying. You begin to feel Him watching you when you are alone. You begin to feel Him near you in moments that once felt empty. This is not imagination. This is awakening. Ibn Arabi taught that Allah is always manifest, but only hearts that are awake can recognize Him. The veil was never covering Allah. It was covering your perception. Ramadan removes that covering. And once your heart becomes familiar with this awareness, it cannot fully return to forgetfulness. Because now you know where your peace comes from. You know where your stability comes from. You know where your belonging comes from. Ramadan was never meant to be just a month you survive. It was meant to be the moment your heart remembers what it was created to see. And once the heart truly remembers Allah, it is never the same again.